What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Pockets podcast, where we take lessons learned from people in the marching arts community to help you level up your life. I'm Eddie.
And I'm Paula. And on this podcast, we're going to get to know the individuals who make up the marching arts community. They'll share their experiences in and out of the activity and the mental, physical, and financial lessons they've learned along the way.
And today's episode is all about the pockets. Today's guest is a full-time composer and educator based out of Southern California. He received his Bachelor of Music in Percussion Performance from California State University, Long Beach, where he specialized in drum set, marimba, and composition.
He's currently the front ensemble composer, arranger, and designer at Chino Hills High School, POW Percussion, POW Percussion, and Box 6.
Since the beginning of his teaching career, he acquired an unbelievable 38 WGI medals. Of those, 9 are world-class championships, 3 with POW Percussion and 6 with Chino Hills High School.
In the world of DCI, he was the front ensemble arranger, music coordinator, and brass co-arranger for the Blue Stars Drum and Bugle Corps from 2013 to 2016, and was part of the electronics arranger / front ensemble design team with the Cadets Drum and Bugle Corps from 2009 to 2012, winning a DCI World Championship during his time with the Corps.
He partnered with fellow designer John Mapes and co-founded Box6.com, which is the exclusive seller of their original indoor percussion and marching band shows. We're so excited to learn about his thoughts on the music industry and so much more, so please help us in welcoming to the podcast, Mr. Ian Grom. Ian, what's up, brother? How are you, man?
I am most excellent. Just hanging out here in the studio, chilling with my friends from 09.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, it's been almost 12 years. 11?
Oh, my God.
Something
When
like
you
that.
say the number out loud, it's way bigger.
That's good friends right there, man. We're
Yeah.
so happy to have this conversation with you. How have you been? How's California? How's everything going over there?
You know, minus the obvious stuff.
Yeah.
Things are pretty good. You know, my wife and I are about to celebrate our anniversary on Monday.
Yes.
Our first
Congratulations.
anniversary, so that's a hype. Let's see what else is going on. Just trying to figure out what's up next, you know,
Yeah.
like trying to reinvent a little bit with the time off. But, you know, eventually people are still going to need marching band shows.
Yes.
So my work is still cranking.
Oh,
I
man.
actually got a lot of time to be able to do some more study and work. So actually, like the stuff I'm writing now is way better because of the pandemic. Crazily, you know, I had way more time to work on it.
Oh, yeah. The focus must be intense right now. That's awesome.
There's no rehearsals to keep me from writing, so it's just basically a nonstop sprint.
Oh, yes. Oh, and you're a hustler, man. So I know you're in there getting some work done.
You know this.
Yes. Well, welcome to Mind, Body, and Pockets. This specific episode is pockets-driven, finance-driven, but we try to tell it from a journey perspective, from the beginning of how you got into this in the first place and your upbringing all the way to where you're at now and some of the financial lessons you learned along the way.
Fantastic.
Sweet. So let's just start from the very beginning. You're from the West
Cool.
Coast, California. What was it like growing up in Cali, and how did you even get into music in the first place?
So my dad worked for Fender Guitars for a long time. So I kind of grew up around music. My mom was into musical theater and also just like an artsy family in general. So performing was like very much part of the Grom family life growing up. My dad would have all of his buddies come over and they have a jam in the backyard for the parties. So it's like, it was very normal for me to just have like a 10-piece band on a stage with lights
Yes.
at like the average house party that my parents would be throwing. So like being around that environment was like just born into me. So I didn't start actually playing until later in life. Like I picked up drums like freshman-ish year of high school. So it's kind of a late bloomer, but I was around music my whole life. Kind of played piano a little bit, took piano lessons when I was younger, but didn't really like crack down and start saying like, I think I want to study music and play something until like freshman, sophomore year.
Wow.
So how did you get into band in school? Like, what was it? A friend that kind of wanted you to come join, or?
So like I tell my dad like, hey, I think I want to learn how to play drums. He's like, sweet. He like flies, like grabs the drum set from the garage, starts putting it together in the house. He's like, there you go. Here's how you play a basic beat. And then I crapped through that for a while. And then I finally was like, maybe I should take some drum lessons. I'm pretty terrible. So we got drum lessons and I was studying with my teacher and he's like, you should really think about joining the school band. You'd be able to play a lot more often. And I'm like, I don't want to go to the band with the band nerds. Meanwhile, I'm saying this with like hair like the Wendy's girl coming down here.
Dude,
I was very concerned.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
So at the tender age of 9th grade, I was very concerned about my image. And God, I wouldn't want my reputation soiled by being in the band. God forbid. And that, of course, turned into like an incredible experience, like super life-changing. My band was not good, but the experience itself like led me to be more excited about it. And then I transferred high schools to go to a different high school that had a better music program. That was really what sort of started the ball rolling down the hill towards becoming a music major. And that's really where everything like accelerated tenfold.
Oh, wow. So you played in the high school band all 4 years of high school?
No, I started like sophomore year playing bass drum, like, like the one bass drummer who can count and is like pointing to everybody else when they should play.
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
Like, you like bring your own uniform. It's like, it's just a hot mess.
Yes.
Terrible program. Then I got into like a more like legitimate program that was still like by our standards today, awful, but a great experience. I was around other kids that were musicians that like played music outside of school that were in bands. And I'm like, whoa, you guys are like in bands, like doing cool guy stuff. Like, and then I met one of my best friends, Jane Kim, who runs this right now. She runs this incredible music school in Torrance in California that teaches all ages of students. And at that time, it was like the first time I had a friend that was like, oh, you have perfect pitch. You can like play all these instruments. You're like in the choir, you can sing. And it was like, I only thought that those were like far away people. Like those are people that make albums and do things. And this was like, oh, my best friend in high school, she's like this super genius. And I think being around my peers that were great musicians was like the first important step in my whole life. Because I had people to look up to that were my age instead of just looking up to people who were on albums or that kind of stuff. So seeing that like, oh, you're my age, but 10,000 times more than I ever will know. Well, how do I get there? And I think that's really where it all started.
That's awesome. It's almost like a peer mentorship that you had going on right in your own backyard. That's awesome.
Yeah,
really cool.
Absolutely. And I think we all, like if you're in drum corps, you gravitate towards people that like inspire you and you like get your crew. And I was lucky enough to find that in high school and that like there was a crew of us that like everyone was really excited about music, not so much band, but like music. And it's like, I remember one of my buddies who would drive me home every day. He was like the greatest guy ever. And he said, you got to listen to this. And he played me Herbie Hancock, Chameleon from the Headhunters album. And it was like game over.
Yeah.
But like from then on, it was like everything sort of changed. And I think like all the crazy stuff I've done in my life, I can sort of zoom back to the initial inertia that started it all. And that was kind of it. My dad was also hugely influential in like dragging me to jam sessions and forcing me to have to like improvise and doing all that stuff at like that really formative age. That was, I think, what planted the seeds that spread the farthest.
That's awesome. And what do you mean by like when you said you guys were really into bands, like in music and jam sessions? What was that? From where I'm from in the Bronx, that wasn't really a thing.
So my dad went to UCLA and he was a music major, and all of his buddies that he was music majors with still got together and played. So when I could play the Guitar Center beat, boom, boom, ba, 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 doom, ba, ba, doom, ba, ba, and then rush a little bit, he's like, cool, you're ready to go. So he would drag me up to the jam session, and it was all these guys that used to play together in college, and then they would tour and stuff, and they were in this wacky, crazy brass band. So they had all these wild arrangements and all this stuff, but we were basically just playing jazz standards, but with like 12 people. So I learned a lot about how to listen and pay attention and like how to sort of drive a group. And, it's like one of those things you start off in the first year or two, you go to the jam session, you're just a bag of rocks. You're not, you're not bringing anything to the table. You sound like a washing machine got pushed down the hill. And then gradually, like all the long card rides back, and my dad would be like, yeah, maybe we just gotta wrangling it a little bit. And by the time you get a little bit older, then you're like kicking the old guys a little bit, like, come on, don't drag. Oh, come on now.
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff was really cool because it got me more of an insight to what I did in college, which was really like focusing on playing live music and being a performer and a professional musician, more so than it informed like my composition or arranging, which came much later.
That's so cool to be a kid and kind of thrown into the fire. And as I'm sure as scary as that was, like it's the best way to learn is just like, good luck.
And with your dad, you're comfy a little bit.
Right. And you figure it out and it worked in your benefit. So that's so cool. Like you just have to kind of sometimes, well, a lot of times you're just not ready, but you just need to go do it anyway.
Ready.
Yeah. Just get in there, kid. You got this.
Yeah. The real opportunities you're never ready for. You just got to pray whatever training you do have, you can like focalize it like when you need it so that it's there.
When I hear that, I'm just thinking about the hours that took, not only with the jam session, but the time with band, but also the car ride back and forth where you're still getting more and more knowledge. So you're really getting those 10,000 hours really early in the game, even though you were a late bloomer.
Well, and that's what it was. It was like hyper concentrating my time, knowing that I was starting late. But it was like as soon as I decided I was going to be a drum set player, it was game over. That's all I did every single day, come home from school until my parents told me I had to stop playing. It was like, you couldn't get me off the drums. And it was all I was doing. That was like exponentially exploded when I got to college and I could practice for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. Then it's like, oh, now we're going to learn real fast.
Yeah, that's well, let's talk about that a little bit. What was that moment that you said, okay, I'm going to be a drum set player. This is what I want to do.
I remember exactly second semester of my freshman year of college, after I like kind of dragged it out a little bit like most people do their first semester of college, like, I'm in college, I'm gonna hang out, oh man, my parents aren't around, and then your grades come in, or you're just like, you're not playing at the level that you want, and you're like, I'm going to cut my hair and I am going to practice until my fingers bleed, like that bad movie Whiplash. And I just went in there in the practice room and I got in it, man. That was it. I was like, I'm gonna get all these classes out of the way, like laser beam focus. I'm going to take every ensemble. I'm going to be in every single group I can possibly do. I'm not going to say no to a gig. I'm going to play every style, everything. And I just went all in, dumped the bucket of hot water in and just said, let's go.
That's awesome. So that was all you. It wasn't like a pressure from dad being a music major or anything, huh?
No, not at all. I think there was like, obviously no one wants to send their kid to music school to come back and be like, no, it didn't work out, So I think I just had to go through a year of being like an ignorant idiot. I went through about almost 40 years of doing that, but I had to get over the being a kid thing, and I had to transition into being an adult to really understand what real practice was. I knew what playing the drums all day was, but I didn't know how to practice. I didn't know how to like hit a goal, actualize the music the way I'm doing it, and not just have the music fall out of me accidentally. Sometimes you play well, sometimes you don't. It's like, how do you get consistent and nail it every time? And that, unfortunately, that awareness, you keep chasing that golden carrot. Every time you think you like really perceive time really well, then you fast forward 2 years, like, God, my time is terrible. I have to really work on it more now.
You just keep reaching new levels as your standard for yourself goes up. That's awesome. Did you play marimba in high school at all, or is that something that came through college?
Yeah, I took like 2 lessons on marimba and then I never practiced. And
you had it. You didn't need 2 lessons.
I got it.
I did not. I couldn't read bass clef. When I got into college, I could not read bass clef. So I was in steel band, like playing steel drums, and I was playing bass pan. And for like 2 years, I had to write all the notes in by hand with all the letters. And like, that's where the level I was at. Like, I got into college because I could play drum set. And like, I started off in basic music theory because like, I didn't even take the test because I was like, guys, let's just start at the beginning. Let's just assume I know nothing.
That's awesome.
And that was actually the best thing I ever did for myself, because so many people that test out of basic music theory, they go into Harmony 1, they're like, whoa, wait, I actually don't. Oh God. Oh no, it's the midterm. And then you're like already sunk. And then they spend the next 4 semesters hating it. And for me, theory came way easier than I thought, because I like got in at ground level and learned it like math. And I didn't accidentally get in the wrong math class. I was in the right class to start. And then I just practiced really hard. And then it just came like, I wouldn't say it came easy because I'm not a piano player. So like, it doesn't like I play piano, but I'm not a piano player.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a difference there.
Oh, yeah.
But I was learning how to do all of it at the same time, learning how to play piano, learning how to play marimba, learning music theory. And because it was all related, it was easy to concentrate that into a fireball and just ride it out. So by the time I was like junior, senior in college, it was like, yeah, I got this. This is all good to go. Now it's just a matter of what am I going to do with my career?
Wow. And you even had your own high standard as well getting into that. That's so cool because I didn't get any of that until drum corps, really. And way before that, you were even thinking about how meticulous your time needed to be, how specific your practice regimen needed to be, and then you started on ground level and then progress the correct way. Brilliant.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, you kind of had to because now there's like you don't have an excuse anymore because you've got the internet. You've got access to every human being on the earth. You've got all the lessons. Back then, you bust your hump to get it done. And like, I remember writing my first marimba solo, like my legit marimba solo that I played for my senior recital, composed it myself, had 10 copies of it in a backpack. I went to PASIC, finished recording it like at 3 a.m. the night before, made 10 copies, threw them all in a backpack with promo kits, and then went and within my first hour of traveling to PASIC, the president of PAS, Mark Ford, was sitting behind me on a plane. And I was like, hey, Mr. Ford, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Ian Grom. I'm a student of Michael Carney's. He's like, oh, how's Michael doing? I was like, oh, he's great. I know you're sitting in a plane and I'm bothering you. I just wanted to give you my marimba solo. Fast forward 4 weeks later, I get an email from him. Bam, we published the marimba solo with Innovative Percussion. Because I was in the right place at the right time and I busted my butt and I hustled.
And you had the courage to talk to him and hand it to him.
Yeah, you got to. I was always like that kid that my mom would be like, go talk to that person. I was like, I don't want to talk to that person. You just have to like get over that fear of rejection.
Oh, and shout out to mom. That's awesome for actually throwing you in the fire. Yes.
Oh, that's like at the grocery store. You know what I mean? When a stranger asks you a question and you're like duck into whatever crevice of your parent's body you can hide underneath. Don't address me. Yeah. I'm invisible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now that I think back, my mom would do the same thing, or just here, pay for it. Or it's like
I don't know how life works.
That's my point.
I still do that sometimes. I think
it happens. So while you were in college, were you kind of doing gigs on the side, or was that something that happened after you graduated?
I was really thankful to have two great teachers in the world of gigging out here in LA, Brad Dutz and Randy Drake. Both were amazing players, and they were like my private lesson teachers. My main professor was Dr. Carney, but those two guys gave me a good perspective. Brad Dutz especially was like, you know, you should be gigging while you're going to school. And like when you get out of school, like you and I are not like teacher student anymore. Like we're competitors. So like if you and I lined up for a gig, don't be like, oh, Brad's my teacher, I don't want that gig. When you get out of here, like you should want to get those gigs. You should want to be as good or better than me and get those gigs. And it really set a precedent in my mind of like how important it was to have your future trajectory already mapped out while you're getting your college work done. And too many people think that something will happen after college, where the reality is if it's not already happening during college, it sure as heck isn't going to happen the day you graduate because you have a piece of paper. You have to manifest that future for yourself as it's happening.
That's a clip there.
That's totally a clip. That's so good. And also there's people that are not going to college who are practicing their butt off and also out there in that pool. So if the longer you wait, it's just hurting yourself. Yeah, that's a great lesson.
You know, there's a perception of age thing that I realized very young that you start going like, well, when I'm 22, I should be doing this. Like, you know what really matters is who's playing the gig right now today. No one cares how old you are, but you're in college. You're like, oh, I do this at junior year. It already starts wrecking you because you start putting yourself in a pigeonhole of what age you are and what achievement you should be doing by then, instead of realizing like you need to be gigging right now, this second, not like in 2 years from now, because in 2 years from now, whoever was playing those gigs has now built up that network of 2 years from now. And you don't get to be like, now I am 24. I am the appropriate age to now start gigging. Can I have my gig, please? No one cares as long as you're building the network and driving towards that. And you got to start that today, yesterday, as soon as possible in whatever you're doing, and really start figuring it out and not using your age or experience as an excuse.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome because it reminds me back. Like I got a flashback of Blast. Like I started when I was 19, or like I remember having my birthday that summer, and I still couldn't drink, and everybody was like,
Yeah,
"Dude,
you
seriously?"
couldn't get into the
I couldn't get into the
bar or
club. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was that same idea though, because I was doing some clubs in New York, and it was like, I'm not going to do drum corps forever. I can't afford this, honestly. So I need to see what the next step
Right.
is. And it was actually Brad Green that pushed me in that direction. Like, dude, you got it. Let's work on it and go. But it was not having the fear of the age, because that was never a thing growing up. Age was just a number, but it was all about work ethic, talent, and see how far you can get and how quickly you can get there, so you're not wasting time on the way and just working.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say I had a pretty healthy dose of youthful ignorance,
Same.
which added to fearlessness based out of ignorance. Not fearlessness as like, I know I'm good enough to do this gig. I like legit thought I was good enough. And I look back and like, you're terrible. You were so bad. How did anyone hire you for anything? You fool. Oh, you pompous idiot. But it got me through that phase of like being just arrogant enough to keep your confidence level up. Hopefully not enough where you're alienating people. But I think there's a little bit of that goes a long way when you're young. That helps keep the fire burning.
That's beautiful.
That's great. So what's the scene out there like? Like I have in my mind what I think it is, but I'm used to the Florida gig scene for the most part. Like I'm assuming it's highly competitive, but could you just speak to that a little bit?
Is this as a player?
Yeah, as a musician in the California scene.
Right. I would have to time travel back to about mid 2000s was like where I was working a lot more. Like at that point, it was very much like anywhere else. Like if you know the right players, you're going to get the gigs. So like my first into the industry was a guy that I met in a band. And then he was one of the ghost writers for the composer that did the music for Survivor, the TV show. And then they're like, hey, Ian, they need like a marimba player for this Survivor season finale. They do it like live on TV. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then like I told everyone, like, I'm going to be on TV. I'm so important. My high school kids are like, I don't care. We're still terrible. Just keep making us better. It's like, oh, all right. And then that parlayed into doing a couple different seasons of Survivor. But like that gig was super weird because like in my head as a kid, I'm like, you're on national television. You can retire. And you're like, this gig only pays $1,200. I cannot retire on that. And the next gig is 6 months from now. You're like, huh, weird. So what then I saw was like, okay, these guys that I'm playing with, they've strung together many versions of this gig. So it's like, oh, and you also teach and you also do this. So what I learned early on, it was like, there was kind of two levels of players. The ones that were so good that they were just in demand and they were always working. And I was never that player. I was never like so good. I was good enough to get by. I learned how to hang with people. So I had like a good rapport, but I wasn't an A-list player. So if you're a B-list player, you got to really you got to know you're a B-list player because that really helps you. But once you're like a B-list player, you got to know how to navigate that and get as many gigs as possible that just get the bills streaming in. So you got to have your church gigs lined up. You got to have your regular residency gigs lined up. You got to do some private teaching. And then you got to probably teach band. Yeah. And because of that one little tiny kernel in my like affordability calculations, like, oh, I guess I got to teach a little band or something on the side, that ended up turning into this gigantic fortress that pushed gigging actually out of the way. So it was like me trying to understand I was never going to break into the top tier. Like I could practice all I wanted. There's 17-year-olds getting into Berkeley that are going to play me under the table. And this was in like the 2000s. Imagine those players now. It's just like this nonstop lava flow of incredible players. So like giving up the delusion of being a professional musician solely based off me being one of the better drummers in the world was like fantasy land. So as soon as I came to grips with that, I understood like I could see the gig scene for what it was and decide like, it's not for me. I can't hang with the top level players. So where can I go where I can? Where can I go where I could be the best at something? And that's really, I think, how I transitioned out. I'll remember the very day I switched over. I was sitting in a cattle call audition to play drums for Taylor Hicks, the guy that won American Idol with the gray hair.
Silver Fox.
Yeah, the Silver Fox, right? And I had just played a month-long TV show And one of the guys in the band, Dan Lutz, was the bass player. He's an incredible bass player out here in LA. And he called me, he's like, Ian, there's this audition. You got to come out for it. I think you'd be great for it. And I get the charts and I'm like learning in my garage at like 4 a.m. because I can't play out loud. And I'm like, oh my God, cattle call audition. Good Lord. And I get out there and there's all these monster drummers and I get in, have a pretty good audition. And the MD's like, yeah, cool, man. We'll let you know how it goes. Just kind of hang out. And like hang out for me, I'm like deep in the valley, very far away, like 2 hours from my house. So I just sit and I'm like sitting for like 6-7 hours, just like wasting away. Like part of me is like, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be on the Jimmy Kimmel show. All this, they said I did a great job on my audition. You know, you look back and go, they tell everyone you did a great job on the audition, you idiot. But I really thought, you know, in my naivete, I was like, I think I got the gig, not realizing, because then I didn't really know I was a B-list player. I knew in here, but I didn't know up here. You know what I mean? So like, I just never got a call. And I just was like, well, I guess I'm driving home now. And I just drove home and it was like this weird, sad drive of like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. Like maybe this like playing thing isn't for me. It's like, that was so much pressure. And then I find out like these guys do this all the time. It's like being an actor. You got to just always be ready to go, always there. And then like from that date forward, a year later, almost to the day, essentially we launched Box 6. And it was like my whole life changed because I decided like I'm hanging up the sticks. I am going to relearn my craft. I'm going to learn how to write for winds. Never played a wind instrument. I'll figure it out. If I can get through college and do all that, I can figure anything else out. So screw it. Let's do it. I love writing. I love teaching. I'm terrible at both. So I'm going to get real good at them real fast. And then 3 years later, we won world championships.
Oh, dude.
It was like that. It was like from 2007 to 2010. Boom.
Wow.
Like 0 to 6.
The level of self-awareness that you just talked about is outstanding. Just having that realization of like, this is where I'm at in your heart and in your head, and just knowing like, okay, this is the adjustments I'm going to make. Now let's shift, let's adjust, and let's go. Because I can see it now in your music too, and in your teaching, and even in your awareness of what the audience likes and how they react to things. It's so cool seeing how throughout your life you've always just been in this bubble of kind of self-evaluating and adjusting along the way.
I think we all know where we really are. We just don't like to admit it, or we don't like to face it. And that like level of commitment to the denial, or the level of commitment to acceptance, is kind of what decides what path you're going to go down and how much relative success you're going to have in that path.
Fire.
That's so important for the musicians out there, or the music majors. Not to sound negative, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
The top echelon. It's a very small group of people.
You don't practice your way to the top. Everyone thinks you do.
Right.
You have to have the gift first. Then you have to work. If you don't have the gift, you're not going to be at the top. You can make it to B. That's cool. You got to be okay with that. But if you don't have the ultimate it factor, the magical gift to play that instrument, all the hours in the world will only get you so far. And it's not to like, people hear that and they're like, oh no, but you're crushing my dreams. Like, no, I'm trying to help you build real dreams that can be actuated. You can like create something out of the dream instead of like only being a disappointment because you fell short of the dream, because you just set the bar not too high, but in the wrong stratosphere. You're like, no, like, you're like right now, if I decided like, I want to play like Arturo Sandoval, like, Ian, you're almost 40. It's way, no, I'm going to practice every day. Like, dude, it's just not going to happen. Like, you watch. Like, I could say that, but it's like I'm setting myself up for failure.
Yeah.
There's certain things you just can't do if you didn't start early enough, or if you don't have the super gift. But that's okay. If we can recognize that, we can in tandem take the right branches that'll lead us to a more successful and more fulfilling pathway, versus going down this super narrow, I can only go down this one stream of success. That's my only way to succeed. And if I don't do that, I'm a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to be open to exploring other options at some point.
Let's talk about those other options. So there was a moment where you said, okay, with the gigging and all right, so you guys are teaching as well. Oh, okay, there's a whole nother side of this thing. When was that moment that you're like, I want to start teaching, and where did that even start?
Sure. Yeah. That was like 2005. I started teaching at a crappy little high school, like everyone does. It's like, God bless the kids back then, though. I didn't know what I was doing. But this is like one of those ones where you walk into the band room of gear and like everything's duct taped together and you're just like, oh, you have like on instrument, you have on a cymbal, singular, like where's the other cymbal? Oh, we just hit it against the chair. You know, it's like one of those things where you're like, okay, we're going to start from ground zero here. Let's figure this out. And I think that ground zero approach made me have an appreciation for teaching. And then like, when I started to get a little bit better at teaching and the kids could produce halfway decent sounds, as soon as I started hearing my own music getting played live, I was like, hello, band.
Okay, yeah.
Very interesting. You're much more enjoyable than just like lugging all my gear up to LA to go play a crappy gig for $75. So that was like really the drug that hooked me, was the sort of addiction I got to hearing my music, teaching the students my music, because I was so passionate to have my music be right and to teach the kids that music as the vehicle to like properly give them instruction on drum set, marimba, whatever it was. But I had this vehicle that I created from the perspective of the player. So it all just sort of like, it was like primordial ooze where I was like, this is going to be really good. I'm terrible at it now, but I see the future in the mist. And I know that I'm going to be really, really good at this. I just need some time to figure it out. And once I knew that, it was like, I was like all in. John, can I volunteer at Chino Hills? He's like, what? So yeah, I'll just come by for free. Where else do you teach? I'll just come by for free. Like, you know, I have my degree in music and I was volunteer teaching many hours a week and just to like get around good kids, because the students I was teaching at the time, God bless their souls, I wasn't a good enough teacher to get them to an excellent playing level. So I got to sort of jump into what John Mapes had sort of created at some of his other schools in the early days and sort of skip having to drag myself through the mud. John had done all the mud dragging. So I got to learn from what he'd already learned. And the rapid growth that we experienced for both of us as designers and teachers was like so infectious that it was like all I could think about for like 3 or 4 years of my life was just 100% dedicated to that, creating Box 6. And it just became like all encompassing. And then the next thing I know, I kind of woke up and it was like, oh, this is your full-time career now. You write music and teach kids for a living. And that's what you do. And that's your calling in life. And you should be stoked. And I was.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So you started teaching in 2005. How did you meet John and even know to go over to Chino and all that stuff?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
John and I went to school together. We were both music majors at Cal State Long Beach. And like John tells the story better than me, but I was the really obnoxious kid. Like I was very loud.
Weird.
I know. It's weird. I mean, look at this guy. Who wouldn't love this guy?
Oh man.
So I mean, imagine this times 1,000 with long hair and just the loudest, most crass human being. And I'd be like, hey, John, what's up, man? Just like yelling his name from across the campus. And he's like, oh my God.
Oh, he's so not that.
He's so not that. He tells it so good. But I remember we were auditioning for jazz bands. And like John goes like, jazz bands, jazz 2, John Mapes, like Ian, who's Ian? And then like, oh, it's that guy. He's like, no, not that guy. And he like realized like we were going to be drum buddies. So him and I both played drum set in the Jazz 2 band at Cal State Long Beach. And that's basically how we met. Fast forward a couple years later. And like I had disappeared into the practice room for a couple years and just like really just grinded everything out. And John was singing and playing guitar and like needed a drummer. And at that time, my best friend, Brad, was playing with John and said, oh, you should have Ian come in and audition for drums. He's like, Ian? No way, dude. He's like, nah, like shut that down. He's like, no. The dude has been practicing. And so I remember bringing my drums in and like we played through the first couple of tunes. John's like, oh, that's pretty good. I was like, I've been practicing, John. So, then we just played a bunch of gigs together and we wrote songs and we were like just doing the band thing, like being in a band, not like toot band.
Yeah.
So then while that was happening, I was like, hey man, I got like this call to teach some band. What do I do? So John came over to the house, explained everything. He listened to my first indoor percussion chart I ever wrote in 2005. And he's like, whoa, what are these sounds? He'd never heard VDL before. He was using like tempo blocks and like the old school like computer system before anyone had VDL. And it was like, oh my God, well, what you wrote was a disaster, but these sounds are amazing. So that kind of like developed this relationship where quickly we learned that like we could both learn from each other. I could make his sounds better. He could teach me more about how does this language work in indoor. And I was busy trying to take like all the knowledge I learned about professional musicianship and percussion and romantic era harmonies and all these things that I loved. And like, I had to get it through this big wall of like what I thought band was, which was chromatic runs and loud, fast things. And like, I didn't know how to translate what I had learned from my musicianship into that world because I thought they were different. And only once I realized they're the exact same world is when my writing really started to blossom into something that I think sounded more like real music, because I didn't treat it like this is how you write band, but only serious music gets written like this. I wrote them the same. And as soon as I started writing them the same and giving the instruments and the players the respect that I would if it was a professional orchestra player, it started to transform my writing like significantly.
And you can hear that in your music now. There's so much just
Thanks, man.
that actual quality. Like, it sounds like you're listening to a soundtrack every time you listen to one of your groups. And personally, it's one of, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but personally, it's definitely one that I like relax into because there's so much to take in, but it's all works together so well, and you can actually absorb all of it at once as if you were watching a movie soundtrack.
Oh, thanks, man. That's always the goal, you know, it's like have it be digestible in a sitting and not need to like recalculate your like perception of life to just like take it in and go, I'm gonna have to see this 3 or 4 times and then I think it'll grow on me. Like I want it to be grown in you right when you sit down.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's crazy. Sorry, I'm like putting all that together in my head.
Sorry,
So,
I just got tribal effect like flashbacks. Yeah, sorry. We've done that one a couple times, but yeah, that was one where I was like, yeah, this is gonna work great. Like this is the one. Like we don't need to listen anymore, and we had a really successful season.
Yeah, I've done that one too. Yeah, I remember that. I've done Tribal Effect too, and I remember just first clicking on it at the website. It's just like, it's like, oh, that's the one. Downloading that.
A little like 12/8 guitar feel. You're like, sign me up. Fantastic.
It's one of those, the kids just instantly connected to it and were excited about it. And that's what it's about to me. It's just like, are people going to enjoy it? Are the people that don't know about band or this activity going to enjoy this? If the answer is yes, then like, cool, let's do it.
And there's a story. It feels good. It's not above anyone's head. And you, from the very first read, it's going to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
So that was 2007 where you started at Chino Hills?
Yeah. So I'm always bad with dates because life blurs things together. But yeah, like when I started helping out, that would have been, I believe that was their 2008 fall show, maybe something around there. It was like my third, I think that might've been like my third or fourth show that I wrote for them. But I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But that was like one of my very, very early, marching band shows where I was really writing a percussion show and then also having winds play at the same time, which why it's like very percussion driven. And I think it's been like a really interesting life learning how to write for winds without losing my percussion background, but also like getting to the point where you can write wind parts that can stand alone by themselves and not just need this like percussion hug to be passable as workable, you know. But there's something about like everything I wrote in the beginning, I was teaching in person. I was never like sending paper off. So it was like every day, like, hey guys, I got a new revision. Hey guys, there's a new trumpet part. Hey guys, there's this. And like at that point, I was bringing everything in as hard copies. And I just always remember opening up my car door and just scores scattered everywhere, thousands of different parts and versions and upgrades, because I always wanted the music to be better. And it was like getting real-time feedback from members, like when you first start writing, is like the most incredible gift ever. Better than any school you can go to is having like a mediocre-ish band that doesn't have incredible players, but they know how to play their instrument. Have them play your music every day. Every day you listen to them, you will learn what you suck at and what you're good at. And you will learn what they're naturally good at and what they're unnaturally good at. Like, they're going to be good at that, but that'll be good in November.
And you're able to cater to that too for that individual group. Oh, it's beautiful.
Right. And I think, you know, like you can feel inadequate when you hear what like the best bands in the world are doing. The worst thing you can do is when you're writing is try to write like that. You can't write like that. That is not what all, it's like trying to write like a drum corps for a group where the kids can barely play a concert effing tune. You got to understand what it's like to teach those kids. You know, Billy on third baritone, he's like, my arms. And you're like, blah, 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 blah. Like, no, dude.
It's not going to work.
First of all, just break their third finger, only use these two guys and give them plenty of time to breathe, and don't assume they're going to work the stagger breathing out on their own. You know, like all these like things that just started getting into my mind from like, by the second year I was doing it, because I was just hearing the failures every day on my end, my failures. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and able to adjust with that group in real time. That's beautiful. And I asked the date because we met you in the summer of 2009, and now realizing how that really was a really fast period where you guys figured a lot of this stuff out. Because when we met you in 2009 at Cadets, you were the sound guy. I remember hearing actually a murmur of one-eyed Ian, because we had another Ian there, and it's just like, does he have one eye? And it's like, it's just weird because nobody knew who you were, but then you came up, and then you just brought the whole production to life with what you brought to the table from an electronic standpoint.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was honestly, that was like one of those gigs that I am so blessed that I said yes to it. Although it's like we can all complain about what it was like to work at the Cadets during that time. And we all did. And that was the bonding time.
Yeah, that staff was tight. Staff was really tight.
That was
we had a common enemy.
Staff.
Great staff. A common enemy and a bond being built throughout that summer with a lot of new people, East Coast, West Coast, South, North. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was crazy because like as soon as I was in there, they're like, oh, you can do more than just like plug things in. I was like, yeah, they already had Jerry Miller, who's like an incredible sound guy, band director, everything. Like, so they didn't need me to plug things in. They were just like program the synths. And I was like, I could do some more stuff. And then we added like a drum set part to that one chunk of the West Side Story thing. We had that like sort of Purdy shuffle section that we added because it was just sort of like sitting there doing nothing.
Stale,
then all of a sudden things started like cranking up a notch. And then it was like me, Colin McNutt, Jim Ancona, and like Ian Moore was writing all the front ensemble stuff. But like this sort of like hybrid of four minds would start like just adding stuff. And we would all start like stirring the pot and adding some stuff. And then that just started happening over and over again. And then that sort of culminated in 2011 when the Core One was like, everyone was putting like 100% in, and like Jim Ancona would write this chunk, Ian Moore would write this chunk, I'd write this chunk, Colin would throw this in, and then I'd do something on top. But nobody had any like hurtful pride in the sense of like, everyone was like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, great. Put that in there. No one was like, this book will be all my book and I will get all of the credit. You know, Ian and Colin were so good about just relinquishing command if someone had a good idea to run with. And that's like super rare for me to run into things like that back then. So it was like, I learned a lot by allowing myself to be open to their process and vice versa.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's hard to find in drum corps too. Sometimes there's a lot of egos in the room, or the ownership of those books, or the pressure to make those books come to life. But when you got a lot of people in the room that can add a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar, a little bit, that gumbo ends up being one of the best in the activity. And it proved itself in 2011 because that show was fire.
Yeah.
That was so much fun. It was terrifying because no one knew what the hell was going on most of the time. Like, how's the show going to end? What are we going to do? And it's like, basically whoever came up with the best idea and could pitch it the best, like being in a movie production studio, that's like what we ran with. And it's like, I remember like having a dry erase board out when I like explained to like the color guard staff how I thought the ending should work. And I was like, yeah. And then we need to get some big angel wings, giant angel wings. And then the angel and the demon, they got to have a showdown. And it's going to be this many counts, 30 seconds. There's all this stuff. Just make it facing backfield. And then like, oh, what about this? And then the next thing you know, we're like, okay, we've got some hit points. I'm going to go do some sound design and get some vocals in. And then you fast forward when you see what the show is and how it all worked. You're like, wow. That's just because we all were just like knew we could say something and everyone's be like, yeah, screw it. Let's do it. If there was an attitude where people like, who's this guy? He's only been here a couple years. Like, we would not have won. Guaranteed. It was everyone's openness, George's lack of knowing what the heck the show was supposed to do. So it's like, I don't know, ask Bruno. I don't know, ask Daniel. I don't know, ask so-and-so. What do we think? And it was like, Ian says we need giant wings. Cool, get some giant wings. We need a huge angel to show down with the demon at the end. And it's like, these are just random conversations you have on the bus, and they just manifest themselves because it was the right environment.
Listen to that, folks. Collaboration, because it could easily have been just, oh, he's the sound guy from, but no, you were so much more than that. You brought in so much more to the table, and they actually took all that stuff and used it for that beautiful product. That just brings joy to my heart, because that's what drum corps to me is about. It's about the collaboration. It's about the similarities that we bring to the table, plus the differences and how we can appreciate each other's differences, because it makes better art always.
Yeah.
And if you look at what happened the year before 2011, Little Jeffrey, dear Lord, that same crew of intelligent human beings, and everyone did all the same things. Basically, the vehicle was bad. The show idea was not strong. So it's like, you can have all the same people and all the same interaction. If the core idea is wrong, you can't then like finish and go, oh, well, we need to get new people in here because that show didn't work. Like, the idea was stupid. Like, there it is. If the idea is stupid, you can't like put lipstick on it and be like, look at this amazing thing we built. You still have to have like the right vehicle. It's kind of related to like knowing if you're an A player or a B player. Do you have a B show or do you have an A show? Like, where does your show really sit if you strip everyone's skills away? Once you throw everyone's skills in, it's only going to get so high as the raw core essence of that show, of what it really is. What does it do when it needs to stand on its own?
Wow. And that sounds like almost the framework for Box 6 a little bit, because you guys definitely have those solid ideas, and the shows stand on their own, just conceptually, the idea of what it is, and then you guys build up from there.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's like every conversation is like, how does it start? What happens? And then how does it end? And we don't write anything until we know those answers. Because if you don't know those answers, anything you write is, where's it going? It has no context. It has no direction. It could be cool by itself, but if it doesn't move forward or go to something else or come from somewhere purposefully, and then like, if there's no, why did you even do this show? If there's no good answer to that, at the end of the day, you're just like spinning your design wheels and putting shiny things in a box.
Yeah, I've learned that lesson the hard way. I was like, you get to the closer, and it's like, what was the point of it all? Uh-oh.
Snare solo, tenor solo, pit run, wrap it up. Cool.
And that's what it ends up being, and the audience can feel that. And by the time you look around at the end of the show, everyone's going to get a hot dog, and it's like, oh, missed the mark a little bit. But let's talk about that. What was it? What was the beginning of Box 6 like, and how does that even work with you and John?
Yeah. Well, let's talk like, the show, your podcast is about business. So I think the most important thing about starting a business is recognizing what you do and don't know. Like John and I had no idea what running a business really meant. We only knew that if we wanted to sell our music, we were going to get a fraction of the royalties from it. Standard royalties, if you get your music published, is 10%. And that's not good. Like indoor shows, you sell an indoor show for $2,000, 10% is not that bad. But like, what's really good is 100%. That's great. And that's a number I like. So I was like, John and I had gotten approached by another arranger who at that point had ran a website, and I was like, yeah, I'll put your guys' shows up. I'll give you, I think the number was like 40%, which, relative to regular, publishing royalties, that's pretty good. But I was still like, nah, why would we give someone else our music to sell? Like, oh, well, they'll do all the hustle. They'll do whatever. It's like, we'll do that. Oh boy. Little did I know what all that would mean, and essentially each of us had to kind of like decide what part of the elephant we were going to consume for like a better portion of a year. For me, it was like, I really need to learn how to write winds, not like just make the MP3 sound good. Like I need to learn engraving. I need to learn like real orchestration. I need to learn how to like do this so it doesn't take a million freaking years. But then I also have to write all the pit parts. These have to be published, ready to go. And it was like, I basically spent a year running like 8 to 12-hour days every day, just stressing about Box 6. Yeah, no, it was like no dating, no nothing. And it was like every once in a while you take a day off. But I mean, it was like, I went full insane for like a year, harder than I ever worked in college even. And I worked real hard in college, but like that 1 year prior to Box 6 launching, had to get all of the music that we currently had published and ready, had to learn how to write, really like nail the winds thing. Cause I'd already sort of written some wind stuff, but it was like, I got to make all these sounds, MP3s legit. It was like launching the business. While I was doing that, John was figuring out like, how the hell do we build a website? what does that mean? What does that look like? And how do we do that? So it was like each of us just dispersed through the land to try and gather crops for the winter, like whatever we could do to survive this thing. And at that point, we had a business partner that knew a little bit more about the business end. And the business end was essentially like, I want you guys to focus on the creativity. I'll focus on building the business model and all that stuff. So that was like the initial phase. And that was like the most brutal part for sure. As far as the concentration of effort it took to launch that. And everyone's like, I got a website. I got a website. I got a website. In 2007, it was not that easy to just have a website and pop it out. Now you could like build a website on your phone and like, all my shows are up. You're like, that's very nice for you. I'm so happy for you that you have that access.
Oh man, but you guys paved the way on that stuff.
Yeah. So it took you about a year to write. Like, how many shows did you want to have to get it up and running?
Right. So we already had shows in our library per se. It wasn't so much writing the shows as it was preparing them for publication and getting them ready to be released. I mean, we were writing more shows, but we weren't like solely writing. It was like, how do we get this stuff so it's like looks professional, sounds professional, and it's like ready to get released? Graphic images. What's the layout going to look like? What's our standard instrumentation? And like, we did write some more music, but it was like, is this wind music good enough? But we were also like working and teaching like freaking crazy while that was happening. That's when we were still like taking 5 groups to Ohio. And it was like crazy. There was, I forget how many years we did that. It was a terrible idea, but there was a stretch where we were taking 5 groups to Ohio. And it was like, we were there for every single performance. We were like just running around like maniacs. So it wasn't like I had time now where I just teach Chino Hills and Pulse and I'm working 12 hours a day. I was working 12 hours a day because I was doing everything else. And also then in that time, any free time was spent at the computers trying to figure it out. And then John was figuring out website stuff. And then we were sort of just like, okay, how do we structure the business? What's the prices? How do we figure out how much our stuff is worth? And I always will thank Ralph Hardiman forever for telling me some really important advice. And it was like, never undervalue your product. It's like, you can't ever put the prices back up.
It can always go on sale, but man, shout out to Ralph.
Because it was
Hardiman.
like, you know, trying to figure it out. And it was like, you know, he was like, at that point, I didn't have a really close relationship with him, but I knew him enough. And like, you know, just over the years, he's been just so wise about things. And I just remember hitting him up about that. And that was his advice. And it was like, oh man, it's like, know your worth instead of like worrying about what everyone else's prices are at, you know, because we were like, we have a unique perspective. We write everything. We do not have extra percussion arrangers. We do not have extra wind arrangers. Not one note will go in your hand for box 6 that didn't personally come out of my fingers. So like everything I give you is like, maybe you go like, no, I'm not sure about this. I don't know if that's the right fingering. I don't know if that's like, yeah, well, at least I wrote it all, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not, you're not going to get like one style of arranging in this. And it's like, not to knock those people, but this is just the mindset. And this isn't like a knock on anybody. It's, you have to pump yourself up why your business is going to be great. And it's not to attack other people as going along. No, my business is great because I do it all and I'm in control of everything. And you want that as a client because that means the person that has the most control is the person that touched everything that I just got in my inbox. There isn't a drum part from somebody else that they might not have floated it in. A different guy did the electronics. The wind arranger finished it 6 months ago. And then the percussion guy did it. Like, nope. Every single thing we do is birthed at the same time, every single time. Wow. There's nothing that we write winds only and then farm out. And it's like, that was the mindset because that's the only thing people were doing is there was wind guys creating wind scores, sending it off to percussion guys. Then they would combine the files together. And that was the standard. And we're like, yeah, we're going to change that. I'm going to figure out how to write for winds. And we're going to be like the first ones that are really doing it. Because there were guys doing all of it. Jim Wunderlich was one of the big ballers and still is that writes winds and percussion like better than anybody. But we were like, we're going to make this website huge and we're going to work really, really hard until we've established like our stakehold in the industry, until our winds catalog can catch up to that. Right now, we can influx a bunch of percussion stuff in it. And now our wind stuff is caught up because I've been knocking out these shows every year. But now we have a big enough catalog that it's like, whoa, yeah, I've got all these options.
Yeah, dude, that's brilliant. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many gems I'm getting from what you just said, because it goes back to the self-awareness piece and knowing your worth, knowing your value, but also knowing that, hey, this is good enough, and I'm putting in all this work. This is me. Ralph gave you a little bit of a, permission to say, hey, it's okay to do that, but you were the one with that knowledge of like, you know what? Yeah, I can do that. That's awesome. And the 10,000 hours, going back to that Malcolm Gladwell, like, you're putting those hours in early and a lot, because you're taking 5 groups to Dayton. You're writing all day, all night, not dating. You're really like focused in that tunnel vision of, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to make this thing pop. And oh, man, there's so many gems in there.
It's really inspiring, especially like for us starting this podcast and this project. Like, it can be overwhelming in the beginning, starting something from the ground up, and who's going to do what and all the things that it takes to get something ready off the ground and have it done well. It's a lot of stuff, especially on top of your full-time job.
Right.
Your jobs,
Jobs.
multiple. But yeah, it's just really inspiring to know, well, you were there and look what you and John have built.
Yeah, from scratch.
It's possible. You just have to put in the work.
Yeah, and it's going to take a lot of work, but it's worth it over time, because as you do those little steps or take those little bites of the elephant, you're going to actually ultimately look at this big product of like, okay, how do we make this work now? And you guys were some of the pioneers of websites. When at least me growing up, that wasn't really a thing. 07, we were joking before, but we had like a Discman and all that stuff at the time. I had no cell phone still.
Yeah, I think I had the T-Mobile Sidekick.
Oh yeah, the flip phone.
Yeah.
Shoot.
It's very popular.
The way I envision it is like, at any point, you're always like barreling down this tunnel, like reaching for like that goal, right? It's always like the same distance in front of you, and you're like, damn it. And like, no matter how much you try, you're like, ugh, I can't quite get that. But what you really have to do is make sure you look backwards down the tunnel of how far you've dug. It's like you're always the same distance from the goal. Like, God damn, I'm almost there. But like, you can kind of lose track of like how much progress you've actually made. And so like, if I think that the beginning for me is like when Box 6 started, that is a crazy long tunnel. Like, for now, I'm still, God, I got to get these parts done. I got to get this done. Like, my checklist and my I'm almost across the finish line. The distance is always the same, but it's the distance traveled down that tunnel has been like,
wow,
where all the learning has come from.
Yeah, and even the business model has changed a little bit throughout the years. Because I remember we did a little bit of work with Wes Broward and Chino Hills doing your co-commission stuff, and just I didn't even know that was a thing until we talked about it and collaborated. But it helped me so much just being new to that school and saying I need to figure out so much more than that. So how can I just have something that I can trust and someone that I can trust that's going to put something together that's going to be a great product from the beginning? And you guys were the ones. Awesome,
man. Well, that's we set this up not to like replace all writers forever. It's to take someone who's like, man, I just want to teach my kids. Can you give me something that's an awesome vehicle so I don't have to stress about the show design? Because like, being a designer is a skill. It is not just a happenstance like, oh, I'm also the teacher, now I'm a designer. Like, being a composer, that is a skill. Just because you put notes on a page does not make you a composer. So it's like, we wanted to go like, let's take the real like heavy lifting of the design out of your hands, so you can like add the window dressing, do all the things you want, but hopefully like the core that you get is not something that you had to like, God, I got to write the music. Oh, I need to talk to these band parents, all these things that band directors and instructors have to deal with, because we know what that's like. We know like dealing with kids in general is just a very consuming thing. And if you're also trying to design at the same time, it's really hard. So that was the whole goal, was like, look, if it's not going to be Rachmaninoff, it is going to be an awesome vehicle for you to get your job done so you can move on with other things in your life, because like for us, this is 100% what we do. So I'm going to work really hard to do that. For the most people that do this, it's a percentage of their life, and understanding that that's your audience kind of helps you temper the language in which you deliver the product, the way that you deliver the product, and how you write it for them.
Oh, yeah. I'm now getting flashbacks of that because, well, one, the product is really good. It's something that the kids can latch onto and get really comfortable with and excited about. But I remember even the back and forths with Rochelle and how easy that process was and how quickly we got into a good relationship of like, okay, she's executing her part, I'm executing my part. I don't even have to really talk to Ian because everything's already there and flowing really well with their business model.
And that's on purpose. Like I do not communicate with the clients. I am a hot mess when it comes to organization. If it is not in a score, I'm a disaster. Like if it's in the score, I am the wizard of the castle. I got it. I'm on lockdown. I will help everybody out, whatever you need. As soon as I leave the studio, I'm like, what aisle am I in the grocery store? My wife is always like punching me in the face, like, pay attention, pay attention. And I was like, good. So that's not my skill. I know that about myself. So we knew early on, we need someone to be like the client liaison. And that's where Rochelle shines so strongly for our business. And it's like, if John and I both had to be tasked with constantly managing the spreadsheet of who's playing what and doing all that, it's just taking energy away from the creative efforts. So we were able to kind of create this like balance of responsibility where I just basically focus on nailing the music, write the best dang music I can possibly write and keep it cranking. John's also doing that, but he's like the buffer between me and Rochelle and the clients. And John is like the Nostradamus of the business. He predicts future disasters. He knows when the locusts are going to come and eat all the crops. He knows when like something's going to be a disaster. And that's one of his greatest skills. And in your business, you want someone that can be that person. And they might feel like maybe they're like pessimistic or they're always negative, but they're looking out for the things that are for sure going to go wrong. Whereas I'm like in the moment, like, man, this sounds great. Ooh, I'm feeling it. Like I've got that artistic excitement about it, but you've got to have someone that's also like, pull the reins in, keep the ship focused and see when the iceberg's ahead.
That balance, that's so important. Like it goes back to the awareness thing, but knowing your strengths and surrounding yourself with people that fill in the gaps
of your weaknesses.
Right.
We have that so much.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would do this without her because what I lack in, she thrives in, vice versa. There's some stuff that we see eye to eye on, but there's some things it's like, I can't. Did you email Ian yet? Oh, I did that 4 days ago. I was like, okay, awesome. Yeah. You got to have that balance.
And I think everything in life, you think like, oh, I want someone that's, oh man, I get along with this person. They're just like me. Yay. That's fine for friends you're hanging out with at the mall. When you're designing a show, you do not want someone that thinks just like you. You already have one of you. You want as much like diversity and perspective change as possible. And for every person you add, if you're just adding another concentration of the same perspective, you already have that represented. You know what I mean? If you're just trying to like have people in a room together just to have more people, great. But if you're strategically trying to get the most out of everyone, make sure, like you said, you're filling in the gaps. And that is like really the key to putting together any good team, any good business, any good piece of music, any good anything is like seeing the gaps and knowing how they should be filled, not necessarily just filling them because they need to be filled.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm just going back to that gumbo thing, because if my ingredient and my forte is salt, and I add it in, and so is yours, and you add it in, and then I add it, and it's just like, that doesn't taste good. That's not the product you want to put on the table. Wow.
Yeah. My dad would always say like, man, if you just put all good stuff in, how could it be bad? I was like, well, it could still be really bad. That's a terrible analogy. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, but also it's like, if I put all the good chords in the verse, then how could it be bad? Like it's not how that works.
Yeah, self-awareness, that's key.
So let's kind of flow into career advice for people. So if there are composers out there, educators, whether they're new in the game or not, what advice would you have for them? And is there something that you know now that you didn't know back in the day that you wish you would have?
Yeah, I wish I knew everything I knew now back in the day.
Yeah.
So that I could be exponentially farther ahead now. But it's like you have to be really honest with where your skills are at right now. And you have to be really honest about how much work you're willing to put the skills in, willing to put in the time to get your skills to where you want them to be. So like a lot of people say like, man, I love writing music. I just got to really work on my piano chops. I'm like, okay, cool. What are you doing to work on that? Yeah, I'm just going to work on them. And I'm like, are you trying to be a classical pianist? Or are you trying to be a composer? What are you going to work on? I'm going to play scales. Okay. What is that going to do? I could play Hanon all day. I can't write any more music now after doing that for 45 minutes than I could when I started at it. I guess my fingers work. And that's like a perfect example of when people have like, I think I want to do it, but you're like, okay, what are you going to do it? And then that's where it stops, because they don't have a plan to go from I have these skills or I don't have these skills. And in the distance is the place where I want to be, where I have those skills. To get from here to there, they have no idea what the pathway is. So a lot of people think like, well, if I could play piano, I'd be a great composer. So they're like, now I'm going to learn how to play piano. Okay, let's try to travel that path. So I practice my scales every day. I'm already wasting time. You're already wasting time, but that's fine. You're like, now I can read both clefs. Like, awesome. And then like the more you learn how to play piano, like the more you realize like all you've been doing is practicing piano. You don't know anything about writing music. You can't write a 1-4-5 progression with a melody against it. You can't write a country tune. You can't write a blues tune. You haven't transcribed any pop songs. There's like literally thousands of things that you could do that are more getting you towards being a better composer than, let's say, practicing your scales. Now that's like obviously like a very wide analogy, but it's being focused on where are you going? Like what skill do you want? So like Eddie, ask me a super specific question about like, let's say like, I want to do this. How do I get there? And let's like walk through that as a test.
All right. I want to be a jazz trumpeter. How would I get there?
Fantastic. Do you currently play trumpet?
Yes.
Fantastic. Have you listened to jazz music?
Yeah, a lot of it.
Okay. Who's your favorite trumpet player?
Arturo Sandoval.
How much Arturo Sandoval have you transcribed by ear?
0.
Done. There it is. Then you send that person away. And until you said, I've transcribed most of Arturo Sandoval's music, then you don't have anything to talk about, because that time put in transcribing is the magic. That is where it all comes from. The most active listening happens in the act of transcribing. Passive listening is great to let it like wash over you and get a feel of something. Active listening, like, I'm really digging this chart, man. I'm like actively listening to it. Cool. Taking 4 bars, looping it until you can smell like, I smell the ride cymbal. I know what sticks he's using. Like I can hear every sound, and like that all of a sudden becomes part of you. That transcribing by ear, writing it down. Now that starts to become your language. Now you're going to start to know the language. It doesn't mean you know how to play it, but you know what it sounds like. And when you know when something sounds like, and you start to recognize patterns, then you start to like, oh, I got to watch a video. What is he doing there? Like, oh, maybe I should take a lesson with someone who studied with Arturo Sandoval. Ooh, they're busy. What about someone who knows someone who knows someone who took a lesson? Like whatever. Get a like small key to the very large castle and just get in the front gate. And now you have a vocabulary in the style that you want to study. You found an in to get the physical like workings of the chops and all of that. And then eventually through that, you're already going to know what your next step is because you started off on the right foot. A lot of people go like, I want to be a jazz trumpeter. I'm going to listen to all of the jazz. I'm going to listen to all of the trumpet players. I bought all of the books. I can play giant steps in all 12 keys on trumpet. That would be very impressive. But, you know, and then there's this giant body of work they've done for themselves when all they really need to do is pick their one favorite player and just transcribe a bunch of stuff. It's a way more actionable result. And every decision we have when we have a long goal has to start with a more achievable result, so that you can just get progress going right away. Otherwise, you're just going to give up because you won't have enough like small successes that will eventually add up. That long tunnel that you have to keep burrowing down, you have to just start. If you just do this and you're like, oh, cool, I'm back where I started. Well, that sucked because you didn't go in one direction the right way.
That was gold.
I wish I had like a bomb to drop right there. That was dope. Oh.
I think, you know, like, you got to be a life skill builder. And what I mean by that is like, I've always like picked up random stuff. Like I'm going to be a card magician. I'm going to be a tennis player. I'm going to be this for like X amount of time. I'm going to be a photographer. Like, and I think I got to the point where like that developed, I think my senior year of college, I was finishing my senior recital. I was on like crazy practice brain mode, like 8 to 10 hours a day, all the time, just shed. You're in that zone. I would get home. What do you do when you're at home? I'm still in practice mode. I could not unplug. So I had to do something else. I had to I could not stop learning in learn mode. I didn't like, that was just how I am. And like when I went that deep down the well, I needed to have another skill. So then I started learning card magic because it was small. I could take it with me every gig. I could have a deck of cards. How did I learn card magic? Well, I found one source that was an expert, that was a video, that was my fastest way to learn. I would visualize that. Then I found a local magic store. I went to the local magic store, met a guy named Ken Sands. Ken Sands, fast talking, like magician guys, like, oh, Ian, that's good, but you got to work on this. We got to, come on, let me show you something. Then I would go to the Magic Castle. I immersed myself in that universe, all while I was working on my senior recital. This was like happening at the same time. And like I was building a skill as if I was learning a new instrument. I took what I had learned of how to be excellent at something in my instruments in school, like how I learned to be excellent at marimba. Excellent might be a dicey word. Proficient. From ground zero in a course of like 4 or 5 years, how I learned how to create at least the illusion of mastery of the instrument at that time, from my perspective. I then applied that in a shorter time frame to learning how to do card magic. Like, okay, I got to get 2 to 3 hours in. I got to always have my deck of cards with me, blah, blah, blah. That became a template I used many times in my life to learn new skills. It's how I learned how to shoot pool. It's how I learned how to do photography. And these things, some I got to a certain proficiency level where I was like, to get any better than this, I would have to do a lot more. So I'm good here. Like I got my pool playing to like a certain degree and I was like, I'm good. To go any farther would require a significant amount of work. Photography, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still trying to like develop my craft in that. And it's something I can kind of do in tandem. But I never stopped writing music while that was happening, but I was reinvigorating my creative process by constantly introducing a new life skill that required me to break down from absolute zero knowledge to get to maximum density knowledge in the shortest amount of time.
There it is, folks. I'm just getting flashbacks to when you said magic tricks, and I don't know if you remember, but in 2009, we were having dinner on or lunch or something on a random free day, and you did a card trick with us. We both wrote our names on it, and actually, that's kind of what broke the ice with all of us because we were just getting to know you too. But it's funny how that helped your people skills as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And even in Dayton, I remember you showed me like a lighter trick or something that I still remember. And
the amount of times, like, I mean, and, you talk about like committing to like a craft, right? Like I used to go with my roommate and we would just run a bar. Like I would start at one end of the bar with a deck of cards, asking complete strangers to show them magic tricks, get the cards slapped out of your hands by people that have been having too much fun. And you learn how to navigate humans. You see people, oh, they do not like magic. They are not into this at all. And then like we meet each other, like, are we done here? Yeah, let's go to the next place. And that was like how we did it. We just ran it. And then, I would go, I did a couple gigs doing walk around magic at parties. And you just learn how to be a gigging, like what a gigging musician feels like, and very different than being in a practice room. A gigging magician is very different. And as soon as I did, I was like, I do not want to do this for a living, but this is fun as like a hobby. I got to a certain point. I've done enough professional photography work to know that I don't want to be a professional photographer, but I love doing it to a certain degree. And my comfort zone is always coming back knowing that like music is what I want to do for sure. But I would like to be able to do other things at a quasi-professional level. So I'm branching out of my skills. And every time I do that, I come back to be a better composer because I left the roost and then I returned back with more knowledge than when I left.
Whoa. And all I hear is like entrepreneurship and sales, like door-to-door sales right there. That's beautiful.
That's awesome, though. That's important, I think, to have other outlets as opposed to, like, what kind of person would you be? What kind of mood would you be in if the only thing you were doing was you're in front of your computer and you're writing and you're writing and you're writing. And sometimes you're teaching and you're writing. Like, to be able to have those other things, like for me, karate, cat's out of the bag, but I'm in testing for my black belt. I've been doing this for about 7 years, but like, that's a huge...
That is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It's a huge outlet for me. And I really relate to what you said because I feel like that's the kind of person I am. I like having these other things that I'm super interested in this, but I know it's not going to be my sole focus, but it allows me to not think about anything else except this cool, other thing that I enjoy that's not my full-time career. So I love it. I'm all about that.
I love that. And it's interesting too, because, if you did have to make martial arts your sudden career, it would ruin the love you have for it, because it would now become this dependency on income, this dependency to be successful, which robs you of the ability to separate your love for it versus your necessity to be good at it. Your necessity to be good at it is there because you have to survive. And that can often like overshadow your love for what you were there for. And I was like, I always like to keep, just like you, I like to keep those things just far enough away that I don't need to do them to survive. I need to do them because I love them. And if you can find that, that's like where you can find the balance where you don't burn out on your priority of like, for me, it's composing. But if I didn't have photography as another creative outlet, I think I would burn out just writing marching band stuff and indoor percussion. It wouldn't be enough for me.
Wow. Huge gem right there. Balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, let's get into like what you're doing nowadays. Like, what are your current projects going on? I know it's a crazy world we're living in right now. So what has that change been to you, and what's going on in the world of Ian?
I am always looking for ways to reflect on the season. And when the season stopped, it was like, I really felt like I was like groundbreaking some new concepts for me. And I never got to vet them. Like, I feel like when you go to Ohio, that's where you really know if what you were trying to do, like for me, sonically, I was trying a lot of different things and different speaker placements. And for most people, like, oh, yeah, it sounds good. For me, it was like, I have this sound in my head that I still have not heard at the end. I have a sound that I want my group to sound like, and it still never sounded right. So I'm always chasing that, like, damn, that is exactly how I've always wanted my group to sound. That's like my golden carrot that I'm always chasing. So then when that doesn't happen, I go like, okay, is it my writing? Is it the playing? Or is it my production skills? And every year I reevaluate. Do we need to use different this? Do we need to use different that? And so while I'm writing now, I'm always trying to like gear my writing towards where that mindset is going. Like, I'm writing for even more clarity. I don't want any mistakes, like in anyone misperceiving, like who's got the melody, what is the chord progression. This is specifically for winds. Like how much is too much spiciness, and when do we just like lose the audience direction? And I have like all my Post-it notes like everywhere. So my Post-it notes kind of remind me of what my goals are for while I'm writing. So I've just been in a deeply immersive target on where just I gravitate. I feel the ocean pushing me this way creatively, and I've just fully embraced it. And it's really cool this year because I feel like I'm 100%, 97% in control of everything. And the results are a direct reflection of what I already kind of knew it was going to sound like, versus writing and like, I think that sounds good. I think that'll work for the show. I am like a scientist in breaking down and still staying creative, but like I'm predicting weather essentially, instead of like, oh, it's raining, get the umbrella, which is sort of like how I was writing music before. And now I'm like storm, like an X-Men, like I'm just controlling the thunder. Now I want snow. Now I'm going to blow you away. And it feels that way because of the change in my process. And that has been like incredibly empowering. And then like, I also have to make sure that within that, I haven't gotten so in control of my process that I lose the spontaneity of what maybe made my earlier work magical. So I'm sort of tethered between two worlds right now. But I guess in sort of a long-winded esoteric answer, that's where I'm at right now.
That's amazing. Well, could you speak into your process a little bit? Because I know you work from home, that there's that entrepreneurship plus the business side of you. Is there any routine or something in your process?
I got you right here.
Oh.
So this is like the process now. Like, oh, there's too much. This is it. There's too much light on this because it's white. But essentially, like I've been living in this with a pencil and my notebook. And I sit at the piano. And like this whole year, I basically tried to write, before I write anything at the computer, I do everything in piano sketch form at the piano with a pencil. No laptop, no technology out there. I'm just writing music, and I'm like writing the parts in piano reduction form. And I'm really trying to like conceive of like an entire piece of music before it ever happens. And like, if I can, let's see if I can find something that has like form. Yeah. So like I'll have something and it'll have like, basically it'll look like a lead sheet. But in that it'll say, real dark, crunchy sound that opens up into a bright explosion. And then I'll like kind of notate about what that should be. So it's like half graphic notation, half jazz band lead sheet, where I'm writing the most important voicings. But essentially I'm like, what is, if I strip all of the BS away, what's the essence of the piece? And how do I create the entire flow? About how long is it? And what should it feel like? And what does the piano reduction sound like? And then I play through it and I go like, okay, that's cool. The middle section sucks though. And then I'll come back to it the next day. And then like by the time I'm actually ready to write, I've got the entire minute plus mapped out. And every single time I have like a minute plus mapped out on piano, it will always turn into like 2 minutes once I put it into the computer. And then I let myself react to the music. But like creating like the loaf of bread, you know, right from the beginning, every single time at the piano was like my test. Like, don't cheat. Don't find the cool sounds and go, oh, cool sounds. You don't even have to know theory. Just put cool sounds, throw a riser in, and then the band comes in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's not how you do it?
No, well.
That's how a lot of people do it.
What God? You know what time is it?
It's been great having you. And,
yeah.
Man, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, so just like trying to get back to my craft from a purist standpoint. And like I've actually like been on a crusade to use less samples. Like kind of like I'm going backwards in time where like if I can write better music, I don't need so many samples in it, especially for marching band, man. It's really difficult to play in tune with samples that tend to occupy the same frequency range as the winds, which are already battling like the intonation issues, which are non-fixable between the front ensemble acoustic instruments. And then when the weather gets dicey and I'm like, maybe we don't need quite so many tonal samples. And if I could write more intriguing wind sonorities that are still achievable in that like environment, maybe I can just write better music in general and not have to lean so much on the samples to add the spice and the flavor.
Wow.
So
that's interesting. And if the sound has issues, you know, we lose power or whatever at a show, the poor band loses power, and then, you know, there's so many things that are missing, and now things sound so barren. So that's because
the moment was like reliant on that sample or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that because it kind of made me flash back to our like mid-2000 days at Cadets, where we would hear some of those Jay Bocook midis, because they would be strictly piano, where sometimes you'd hear like that, and this we're talking like early 2000s, this is like that bad trumpet sound, but he would do it all on piano, so when we're listening to it, you have to kind of just hear that high pitch, that's the trumpet part there, but it all correlates with one another, even though that might be the tuba, it's one big sound, and seeing that you do it that way, it's like, oh man, just the greats work like that.
And that's like, Jay has always been one of my biggest influences. And actually now when I do my final wind orchestrations, after I've already made it sound good on the MP3, I actually only do now, I set all of my winds to a piano sound and I do all of my orchestration as just one giant piano, because I realize why Jay did that. You hear every single pitch as a vertical sonority on the same instrument. You can actually hide mistakes in the orchestration when all the sounds are different, because you don't hear the clashes in the voicing. When you hear like a minor ninth, or if you hear like a second that wasn't supposed to be there, it can hide when you have like woodwind sounds and all that. When you put everything on a piano, you hear the vertical sonority. Like if you have composer ear for how chords should sound when they're played together, you can actually clean up all of your counterpoint way easier. So that's been like my new process of really stripping it down. And if I highlight just the low brass and I press play, do I hear the music without hearing anybody else? Like, did you fully create a voice for them that they enjoy playing, because it encapsulates the music? If you isolate the mellophones and trumpets, if you play them together, does like that have interaction, or do you need to have all the voices for those parts to make sense? And I think that's where your music starts to sound not great, because the performers, even within their own sections, don't have a cogent thought. It's just like, no, it's all vertical. Once you put it all together, it'll all work. And that's not how the great music works. The great music, when you really analyze the great music, when you just play like the upper brass parts, you're like, woo, that's a whole thing. And I wanted to make sure when I was writing those types of moments, that should always be like a whole thing, and not like, just give it to the marimbas, they can play all that. You know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's cool seeing that you're still digging down that tunnel too, and there's I think a whole nother level to Ian Grom coming in the future, folks. We should be a little scared that he took a year off, folks.
Yeah,
dude, I'd be scared of me. I'm not gonna lie. I've been doing homework, y'all. Well, I got my tuning book, everything.
It's so cool. Like, Ian is just a learner, like a constant learner. Whether it's your little side, I'm going to do magic now. I'm going to do whatever. Like, you just like learning. You enjoy the process of learning and gaining new skills. And that's super important. And a great takeaway is never stop learning.
Lifelong learning. That's beautiful.
And, you're a more compassionate teacher when you've recently failed at something, when you've had to be terrible at something recently. It's too many teachers, they only teach the thing they've already known how to do for so long. They don't even know what it's like to be bad at something. Try to learn how to serve a tennis ball. Man, that'll humble you real quick. Like, that box gets real small. Looks big when you're up close, but when you're hitting a tennis ball, and the next day you go to rehearsal, you're like, you're going to cut that kid some slack because you know what it's like to be frustrated about something you've done 150 times. And you're like, you know what? I just got to come here tomorrow. Then, normally you go to rehearsal, you're like, come on, guys, you got to get it the first rep. Like, shut up. Nobody gets it the first rep. Dude. Just stop saying we are a first rep group. Like, ain't nobody a first rep group. Just
Thank you. Louder for the people in the back.
Oh, that's crazy, man. Yeah. And you're creating such monsters over at Chino Hills and Pulse.
Thank you, man.
Man, it's beautiful seeing how you guys are growing that culture. And it shows when we go to Dayton, when it's like, oh, California won. Won what?
Everything.
California just won. Yeah.
Dude, it's just like, it's so incredible to watch. I saw a clip today, the clip that you posted from 2018, Chino Hills.
Yeah.
I was blown away. I was like, first of all, where's this drum set player now?
He's at Pulse.
Okay.
He's like in every clip. I could show clips for like the past 6 years, and he's the drum set player in every one.
Incredible. And just a small clip, but I'm like, how are these high school students? When you step back, it's just
Well, then you get to
incredible.
The instructor who knows the drum set, studied the drum set, and knows the woes that come in between and the path needed in order to actually branch through that tunnel. It's a beautiful correlation with you and those guys. I'm really proud of what you guys are doing over there. It's
thanks so much, man. I mean, the kids have to do all the work. They're the ones that got to play under pressure. But we do try and set them up for success in the best way we can. And it's like, you see that video of Nick, you're like, he's amazing. It was like, well, that kid has put in so much work, and now he's like a man. He's like, in that video, he's a kid. Then you watch him at Pulse. You're like, you are a man. You are coming into your own. You have your own concepts of music. You have your own perceptions of things. And, it's like watching a student go that pathway is huge. And, we've had Nick as a student even since he was in junior high. So it's like, that isn't just like every kid at Chino Hills can play drum set like that. But we have a good drum set player now. But he didn't get to go on a 6-year pathway from like middle school to his senior year. And this player knew that. So he is like exponentially better now because he knows the history and the shoes he has to fill. But he also like knows that I don't expect him tomorrow to be like Dave Weckl. It's like, I just want him to be the best drum set player he can be every day he shows up. And however long, it's really the same thing. It's that carrot. I just want you to keep the same distance to the carrot the whole time. Every once in a while, you can look back behind you to check your progress, but just keep digging that tunnel in a straight line. And eventually, you're going to be way farther along than if you're just worried about where you're coming from and where you should be going the whole time.
We really hope you enjoy this episode with Ian Grom. You can follow Ian on Instagram at IanGrom_music. You can also find his professional photography page at Ian Grom. Check out box6.com to learn more about the company and to hear their incredible shows.
You can find the Mind, Body, and Pockets podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. We'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with a friend. You can also learn more about our project at mindbodyandpockets.com. Check the show notes below for links to everything we just mentioned.
Thank you so much for all the support. Until next time, keep taking steps to level up your life.